How's it going today, everyone? So today's video is going to be a video response to my friend Ren. He had recently made a video talking about what Sony EU had mentioned about backwards compatibility, and I just wanted to share my 2 cents on the topic. I also wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of the other topics that were mentioned in that video, such as Xbox backwards compatibility, PS2 to PS4, and just backwards compatibility in general. I have talked about PS2 to PS4 before in a previous video, but that was strictly talking about some of the games that should and shouldn't be going on there. If you haven't seen that video, you can go click on the link in the description, but without any further delays, let's get right into the topic at hand. To address the statement made by the Sony rep, they basically said that they felt as though the Gran Turismo games on PS1 and PS2 looked ancient. Along with that, they stated that backwards compatibility, while a feature that is highly requested by fans, is not a feature that many people use. Much like Ren, I will say there is some partial truth in the statement. Some people will just not go back to these older games because they just don't want to play something that is old or doesn't look like what's up in today's standards. If it doesn't play or look like what a game does by today's standards, they just will not touch it. However, this is where I'll disagree. We have Sony's PS2 to PS4 feature on PSN, which is quite frankly a lackluster service. And it simply boils down to lack of games, lack of promotion, and just a real lack of incentive to invest time and money into the feature. I hate that we don't have backwards compatibility for PS1, 2, and 3 games on the PS4, but I would settle for PS2 to PS4 if there were more games. It's like asking Microsoft where are the games for the Xbox One. There aren't any. There's just none. Like, if there is a game that you want on PS2 to PS4, fucking forget it, because that feature is just lacking. It's no wonder why on Sony's end people are just not interested in using the feature as much as backwards compatibility has been in demand. If you bring in the games, people would invest in it, in my opinion. If you promote it, especially prominently with advertising or even tying it in with PlayStation Plus, it would probably pique interest. Now, going back to bringing in games, I still don't understand why Sony hasn't brought in some of their own games into the mix, or better yet, get into some agreements with both Western and Eastern publishers to bring in various different games. Now, something that I actually disagree with Ren on is the pricing for PS2 to PS4. While games generally cost more than the PS2 digital games found on PS3, starting at $14.99, with some even being half off on the first week of being on the PS Store, it really wouldn't be so much of an issue if we started getting more games, especially titles more on the rare side of things that cost well over a few $100s for having them being complete with cover art and manuals. While pricing can be a factor, I'd be willing to overlook it depending on the games. With Microsoft, there is a chart out there showing what people want out of the Xbox One, and it comes as no surprise that people want an Xbox One for the games and not for the backwards compatibility. I've had conversations on air in the past about this topic in particular in regards to the Xbox platform, and I remember specifically that Reapers had disagreed with what I had to say about it. I was more in favor of the backwards compatibility. I felt as though it was, at the time at least, a good enough incentive to get people on board with an Xbox One, because that was something that they held over Sony, was that you can play your Xbox 360 games on your Xbox One if they were supported, and there was also talks of original Xbox games being supported with the Xbox Scorpio. When we get into this and really looking into it, I can see where his point can stand here, in the sense that Microsoft just doesn't have any games. And sure, backwards compatibility is a nice feature to have, but it's not a selling point that holds over more value in comparison to actually getting new games. New games hold more value than old in this particular instance. Now, I will give credit to Microsoft to some small degree. They have better promotion when it comes to their feature. They have better promotion in comparison to Sony when it comes to Sony's PS2 to PS4 service. But they still have the same problem as Sony, where there's just a lack of supported games. there needs to be more games on this particular service. If there is lack of games, there's not that many games that you can actually play via backwards compatibility, it really doesn't matter. But in Xbox's case, there's still that issue that in general there are just no games to play. Overall, backwards compatibility is a great feature, but if it's going to become relevant, these first-party companies need to support it by bringing in games on a regular basis, promoting the service, and giving consumers incentive to invest in it. Sony really needs to understand that while gamers are not investing into PS2 to PS4, it's not necessarily them not wanting to, as it is Sony themselves not really providing consumers with more. I think the good question to ask Sony is if they like money. Well, Sony, do you like money? If the answer was yes, then what the hell are you waiting for? Bring us the games. Anyway, I think I've rambled on for long enough. I really need to head to bed since I've been up since last night, and yeah, it's not fun being super sleepy trying to record this shit. But before I go, I have something to share. I'm currently working on another episode of Past Track, which should be out sooner than the first episode, but I make no promises. There's also another video that I may or may not work on later today, if not tomorrow, but if I do work on it, I'll leave that one to be a surprise. That said, I hope you all enjoyed today's video. If you don't already, you can follow me on Twitter as well as on Twitch, and I'll see you all in the next one.